Hi, this is Mike Ignatoski, the creator of GreenFox, the spreadsheet that uses Excel programming to make it behave like an electronic baseball score sheet or scorebook, and it automatically computes the game stats, which can be a big time saver. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you find this video helpful. In this video, I would like to demonstrate what I feel is the most valuable feature of GreenFox 2.0, and that is the ability to track cumulative stats. So let's see how that works. Although tracking cumulative stats is an awesome feature of GreenFox 2.0, it is limited to the spreadsheet functioning in some type of league mode, either the league HTS or historical team season or league HLS historical league season. It doesn't track cumulative stats in free play, but only in one of the league modes. In my example today, if I look at my league sheet, you can see I'm working with the 1969 Mets in historical team season mode, or HTS. If I look at my schedule, you can see it has a 69 Mets schedule. 162 games are on the schedule, and I've completed 7 games. You can see it kind of shows the results and the scores of those first 7 games. And back to my score sheet, this is my 8th game, so I'm just about ready to compute the stats and then for the game and then save them to my cumulative stats spreadsheets. So now I'll compute the stats for the game by clicking the Do Stats button up here. It computes the stats. It gives me the standard message at the end which says, hey, I'm done. I didn't run into any errors, but you should confirm some limitations, especially inherited runners making outs. Okay, so let's take a look at the stats. I didn't have any situations where I had inherited runners making outs where I can mix up which pitchers should get credited with the out. So if I look at my changes here, I don't have any of those problems. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I left this ID column here, but you can see it filled in the ID column for everybody. So I'm going to click this show hide thing because I don't really need to see that now, and leave that off. It just gives me a little more room over here and I can see all my stat columns. So once I finish that, I'll go down here and enter in these final pitching stats. And in this situation, the Phillies won 5-4, and let me see here. Looks like Ron Taylor gave up the winning runs in the bottom of the 8th, so he gets the loss. So let's give him a loss and a game finished. Gary Gentry, who started the game, I'll give him a quality start since he pitched 7 innings and gave up 3 earned runs. So I'll give him that. For the Phillies pitchers, look up here. Let's see, when did they take the lead? In the bottom of the 8th, so it appears that Chris Short pitched into the 8th but didn't finish it. Barry Lurch finished the 8th, so he'll get the win, and Grant Jackson will get the save. So let's give Barry Lurch the win and Grant Jackson the save, and the game finished. So that's that. Now what's next? Now before I save these game stats, there's one more thing I want to show, and that is right here. When you're playing a league mode, this button is available or visible, and what it does is it offers the opportunity to automatically assign the errors that occurred in the game. This is only an option in league mode because in league mode, since GreenFox provides the starting lineups and those include the starting positions, it feels like at least it knows who started in what position. So you can see here the Mets their pitcher made an error in the 8th inning. They had 1 error. The Phillies had 2 errors. A left fielder made an error in the 3rd, and the center fielder in the 5th. So I'm going to click this button, And it gives me this disclaimer that says, hey, I found some errors, but it only assigns errors to the starting lineup players. This is because GreenFox does not track substitutions. It'll list them, but it doesn't really track where they're playing. So it says you may need to manually correct any errors that were assigned incorrectly. Do you want to keep going? And I'm going to say yeah. So it said the detected game errors have been copied to the stats table. Manually correct if necessary. So let's see what it did. Let's look at the Phillies first. It said there was an error on the left fielder and the center fielder. So if we go down here, playing left was John Briggs. You can see he got an error. And the center fielder was Larry Heisel, and he also received an error. So that worked fine. The tricky part comes in here with the Mets with the pitcher in the eighth. And so per its disclaimer, it assigned the error to Gary Gentry as getting the error in the eighth inning. But Gary Gentry wasn't pitching in the eighth. If we look down here at the Philly score sheet, Ron Taylor, so Gary Gentry pitched until the seventh. That's when Cal Kuntz pitched the seventh, and Ron Taylor pitched the eighth. Here's the error that it found on the pitcher, which was Ron Taylor, which happened in the bottom of the eighth. Now the challenge here is, so it shouldn't go to Gentry, so we can click here and hit delete and remove it. Whoops. I'm not sure why it jumped that. But let me go up here to this zoom and zoom out a little bit to squish my score sheet better. Okay, so now the challenge is when you have relief pitchers making errors, it's a challenge because they usually don't bat, and so they're usually not listed here. So we can either ignore that, ignore the whole thing, or what I'm going to do is go back here and just add Ron Taylor at the end. He won't bat, but I'll just put his name in here like this. So I'll click on this. I could click here even if I wanted, but so let's say I click here and I say show the bullpen because that's where Ron Taylor was. The pitcher, I pick Ron Taylor, say OK. He then goes down here at the bottom. I'm not going to put anything for him, but now I'm going to recompute the stats and see if it puts his name here. I could copy it here, but the problem is it wouldn't have his ID. I'm going to show these IDs again because I need this ID for the stats to work. So now I'm going to say recompute the stats. And let's see, overwrite the pitching string stats, which that's who got the win, the loss, and all that stuff that I already did. I say I don't want to overwrite that because I don't want to do it again. So I'm going to say no. Okay, and it didn't do it, and I just realized why I didn't do it, but maybe it's a good example. It didn't do it because it figures out the game's only 9 innings long, so anything over in the 10th it ignores. So I'm going to put this here and cancel it. So now it has the Ron Taylor kind of coming in the 9th. So let's redo it and see if this works. Overwrite, no. Okay, and now he's listed here. So he doesn't have any batting stuff, but what we can do, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see. Yeah. Okay, here's my error. So I'm going to go over to Ron Taylor underneath this error and put a 1 here. Yeah, I guess I should redo these because it does overwrite these, so I guess that's another lesson learned. So I have to take it off Gary Gentry, leave it on Ron Taylor, and these ones assigned correctly. So that's what I wanted to kind of go over there was if you want to track these errors, you could use this button to help you out. But especially if you have errors on relief pitchers, It will require a little bit of finagling to get it right, but that's up to you whether you want to deal with that or not. Okay, so now we're ready to save the game stats to our cumulative stats sheets. So I'm going to go up here to this green button, click it. It's going to go through some Excel backflips and wait till this thing pops up. It says, do you want to update the cumulative player stats? And right now I'm going to say no I'll describe that later. So I'll say no. So now it's done. Now let's take a jump over here to this league help page a second. I want to just briefly revisit this section here, which are the stat sheets. This is what are all the different stat sheets. So there are 8 different stat sheets, and these are all the names. You can ignore the last S at the end because that's on all of them, but the other ones, the first letter stands for whether it's a game stat sheet or a cumulative stat sheet. The second letter, it'll be a P for player or a T for team. The third letter will be a B for batting, P for pitching. So it kind of explicitly describes each one here. But I want to say here that the most important are these 2 sheets here, the game player stat sheets, because all the other 6 stat sheets are just ways of adding up what's already in these 2. This is where the only place where it stores something that's really unique. So it's important that these are right. If they're right, all the other ones will be right. So let's go back to our sheets here, this game player batting. First I want to say on the score sheet, if we remember, this game ID started with 415. So that's what we'll know is the newest game. Actually, before I even jump to the stat sheets, I want to show the schedule, because part of this save league game and stats and results will updates the schedule. You can see here, row 15. This is the game I just finished. So it bolds this game ID to show that it's been completed. It writes in the date over here of when it was played or replayed. The score, if the HTS team here, which is the 69 Mets, it highlights them or puts a color around them, whether they're red if they lost and it'd be green if they'd won. And it writes the score. And it will also update this table up here. Now it says completed games is 8. So that's something that also happens. So let's jump to the stat sheets. GPBS, game player batting stats. Let's jump down here to the bottom. Here are all the stats for this, starting at row 163 and down. You can see here are the Mets, and here are the Phillies. You could also use these filters here if you want to. If you know what one you're looking for, you could say, yeah, just show me this 415. And those are the games. I'm just going to clear this filter, and so it shows all of them. If we go to the player pitching stats, same thing. These bottom 6 rows, would be the pitching stats. You can see here are the 3 Met pitchers, the 3 Philly pitchers, and this is all their stats. This last column, this pitch count, is blank because we didn't fill it in, and GreenFox doesn't compute it. Looks like I need to center this last one, but anyway, so that's why that's blank. For most people that aren't worried about pitch counts, don't worry about it. So now it also would have filled in these next 2, these game team stats. So if you go to the team batting stats, you see these bottom 2 rows are what just happened. And it gives these kind of intro columns or whatever that would just kind of show you what the game was, who the starters were, and even though it's one game, there's a row for each team. There's a row for the Mets, shows kind of who their starter was and who the opponent was, and then for the Phillies, same thing, only it's kind of flipped around. So then over here are the actual batting stats for the game. And it also here computes these 6 additional columns for singles, total bases, plate appearances, batting average, slug percentage, on base percentage, and OPS. So those last 6 are the computed columns based on all the other information. Now, if we look at the cumulative player pitching stats by clicking this sheet, we'll see our new pitchers are, well, we can look at Ron Taylor now has a loss. Who else was that? Gary Gentry or Chris Short. This was his first game. You can see he's got 1 game started and no decision. But you can see here there are a few pitchers that have pitched a couple of games. Gary Gentry, that was his 2nd game pitching, and these are his stats. And similarly, it's the same. Not the same as the team computed pitching stats up here. The last 2 stat sheets are the cumulative team stats pages, so CTBS, cumulative team batting stats. So these are pretty brief because there have only been 4 teams that have played in my Mets season so far, but you can see here that the Mets here, oh yeah, they have 7 games because I didn't compute the cumulative team stats yet. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to click this. Similar to the cumulative player stats, there's a button just for the batting. If I go over here, there's one just for pitching. But on the batting sheet, there's the orange button that will compute batting and pitching, and that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to say compute the cumulative team batting and pitching stats. So that didn't take too long. You can see now the Mets lost, so they're now 3-5, but they have 8 games. You can see all their batting stats. And because these are all the games I've played so far in my season, these are my cumulative season stats. So as kind of a sanity check, we can say, right now the league's batting 268, and it's 139 hits over 519 at bats. If we look at the cumulative player batting stats and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see those same numbers, which is what it should be. Similarly, for the pitching stats, cumulative team pitching stats are here, and we could kind of look at the same kind of thing with these innings pitched of 140 and 2/3 innings. If we look at the players, we'll see that number is the same. The ERA of 2.5 will be the same as this 2.5, just to kind of, as a sanity check or a feel good check to make sure that the numbers add up right in each sheet, and they do. So that's a basic rundown of the cumulative stat tracking for league mode. It all starts with your game, doing your game stats, doing the manual tweaks at the end for your pitching win, loss, and all that. Take care of your errors if you want to do that. Then save your league game stats. Remember, it'll update your schedule like this, and then it'll update the game stats, and it'll prompt you for updating the cumulative stats, and you can say yes there if you want to, but I didn't, just so we could actually see that it made some changes, but you'll get the same answers. So anyway, that's the end of the GreenFox 2.0 cumulative stat tracking for league mode. Hopefully you can take advantage of that, and happy stat keeping. The last thing I want to mention with the stats sheets is kind of maybe a disclaimer or a quirk, which is I haven't mastered how to make sure the totals row is always at the bottom. It seems like sometimes when I do some sorting by the stat columns, sometimes the totals will remain at the bottom, other times it gets sucked up into all the other rows and then kind of gets jacked up. So I'll be working on that in future versions to get that fine-tuned, but I still think in general the stats are pretty solid, and I think they'll be a benefit to many people. I just thought of one more thing, which has to do with, I guess correcting or making a mistake. Or so the first thing would be, if I go back to the score sheet, let's just say after you click the save league game stats and such, you realize there was a mistake in your score sheet, and so you go and correct it, redo your stats, and if you click save league game stats and results again, it'll give you a prompt like this and say, hey, I already found stats for this game, do you want to overwrite it? And if you say no, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't create duplicates, it just does nothing. But if you say yes, it will go and erase the current game stats and then resave whatever you just computed. And I'm just going to let this finish. And I could recompute the cumulative stats here if I want to. I'm not going to. But anyway, so if you do that, that's the way to say or correct a mistake in your current game. If you were to maybe after you had reset your score sheet and maybe you saved it as a PDF or you figured out later that you made a mistake and the score sheet's already been reset, you can't really do what we just did, but you'd have to go to these game sheets and update it here manually. And when you did that, then you just update the player one, and then you go over here to the game team stat page and click the orange button to recompute the team stats pages, and then go to the other cumulative ones and click those orange buttons, and that'll resync all the other stat sheets based on those original game batting and game pitching stats. So hopefully you won't have to do that a lot, but that's a way to basically fix a mistake that you found later on. Well, that wraps up this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you found it informative and helpful. Please feel free to leave me some comments and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to be alerted when I post new videos. I hope that the GreenFox spreadsheet will save you time in keeping score and doing the game stats of your games, resulting in giving you more time to play the games that you want to play.